Good afternoon, everybody. It's Nora Webb with Aegis Energy here at Presbyterian Village with our wellness discussion of the week. Today, our topic is Alzheimer's and the Brain Awareness Month, brought to you by Alzheimer's Association. So let's go ahead and we'll get started. So just some facts and figures to begin with for our Alzheimer's and Brain Awareness Month. Worldwide, there are 50 plus million people who are currently living with Alzheimer's and other forms of dementias. Over 6 million Americans suffer from Alzheimer's alone, and Alzheimer's dementia deaths have increased by 16% over the span of COVID-19. So our brain is compartmentalized into three main components: the cerebrum, the cerebellum, and the brainstem. So the cerebrum is, as you can tell, it makes up a majority of the brain, and it's associated with processing and our cognition function. The cerebellum plays an important role in monitoring our motor function, especially our coordination, precision, movement, motor learning, all that good stuff. And then the brainstem connects our brain to our spinal system, and that serves a critical role in regulating involuntary actions of the body, like our heartbeat, our breathing, all that stuff. So, in Alzheimer's and dementia, how is the brain affected? So we have what's called neurons, and we have 100+ billion nerve cells of neurons within the brain and the body. As dementia progresses into Alzheimer's, so for those who don't know the main difference between dementia and Alzheimer's, dementia affects more of our short-term memory, and Alzheimer's affects both short-term and our long-term memory. And so as the brain sort of starts to rot away, in a sense, these neurons and these nerve cells slowly start to die and fade off. And so as you can tell in this first image to the left, you can see what a healthy neuron looks like in the brain, and then what a neuron affected by dementia or Alzheimer's looks like. There's also plaque that builds up with this illness, and this plaque is abnormal clusters of protein fragments called beta amyloid, and these build up between the nerves and cause the brain to rot, essentially. And you can look at these images to the right, what a healthy brain looks like without Alzheimer's or dementia, and then what a brain in severe Alzheimer's eventually progresses to. So the stages of Alzheimer's is gradual and slow. My grandmother suffers from Alzheimer's, and about her 60s or 70s, we could clearly tell she was in the early stages. And so in the early stages, on the far left, you can see where the brain starts to affect your learning and memory. And that's where we often see those early signs and symptoms, is she was getting her memories mixed up and she wasn't learning as quickly as she was. So in the early stages of dementia and Alzheimer's, we see that learning and memory compartment of the brain starting to be affected. As it progresses, it then affects the thinking and the planning area of the brain. As we progress into the mild and moderate stages, our speaking and understanding speech is affected, and our spatial awareness. The severe stages consist of widespread cell death. So here, people begin to almost revert back to a child in a way. I know I've had a great grandmother who her Alzheimer's was so severe that she couldn't speak, she couldn't dress herself, she couldn't feed herself. She was fully dependent and reliant on someone else to take care of her. And in these stages, we can see everyone is different. Some people stay within the early stages for a long period of time. Others significantly progress from early to severe stages within a matter of months. It just depends on the individual, and it depends on the severity of the illness. With the speaking and understanding speech component in the mild and moderate stages, that can come in a lot of different forms, whether the individual starts making up words that aren't actually words, or they get the definition of certain words mixed with other words. For example, my grandmother, she loves to do puzzles. She loves to do the jumble puzzles where they have words mixed up and you have to unmix the letters to spell the correct word. However, she makes up a lot of new words that are not in the dictionary, and she is fully convinced that it's a word. And so for her, she can understand and speak correctly and fine, but when it comes to reading and writing words, she oftentimes gets all of her letters mixed up and the spelling and understanding of definitions confused. Spatial awareness is also another component of Alzheimer's that is affected. Not only does our balance awareness decrease as we age, but also with Alzheimer's, our spatial awareness decreases. For my grandmother, she oftentimes, not only does she struggle with her balance and equilibrium, but her spatial awareness, not being aware of where a door is or where steps are. We have to constantly remind her to be aware of those things, even if she has been familiar with that environment for years. So knowing the signs, kind of going off the last slide, in the early stages, the first thing to kind of go is that memory and learning component. We start to see a lot of words and questions repeated. Memory loss is the start of this. We then start to see it progress in our planning and solving problems. That begins to become a challenge. I think one of the earliest signs that I noticed in my grandmother is asking the same question over and over again, and not even a minute would go by and explaining the same thing over and over. It almost happened overnight. It was very sudden because we all tend to forget things even at a young age, but when it's a constant, absolutely have no idea of what was said to her a minute ago, that was starting to become startling. Another sign is having difficulty completing familiar tasks. So for instance, going on a walk. I know a lot of older adults who I know with Alzheimer's, including my grandmother, who she is an avid walker. She went on a walk every day of her life, and then she slowly started to stop walking. However, in her brain, she thought she had gone on her walk for the day. So even though we knew she had not gone on a walk for that day, in her mind, she genuinely thought she did. Confusion of place and time. This is a really big one, especially for older adults. And as this illness starts to increase and get more severe, changing environments and changing the time and place of something for an individual with this illness can be really severe. I know anytime we went on vacation with my grandmother, because she lived with us, anytime we moved her to a hotel or something, it's like the illness was heightened. Her confusion was heightened. Her lack of awareness and spatial awareness was heightened. And that can be really challenging because they're already confused as it is, but changing the environment suddenly on them can really be stressful. Another sign and symptom is difficulty understanding visual images and spatial relationships. Also, as mentioned earlier, problems with words, whether it's speaking or writing. The severity of Alzheimer's can lose that capability of communicating with our words and writing. Inability to retrace steps. This is often seen in those earlier stages with the memory loss, forgetting what questions they've asked, forgetting that they've said the same story 3 times back to back to back. It's almost like a broken record in a sense. Poor judgment and decreased decision-making skills. We can see this more in the mild to moderate, sometimes in the early stages, but more in the mild to moderate. My grandmother was very adamant about certain things as a younger woman than she is now. There are definitely things that she has done in her past that she does not do now that has been a surprise for all of us, because she's been so adamant about it in the past that we would think she'd be just as adamant about it now. But at times she can get a very spontaneous, nonchalant attitude about certain things, which she has never had before. And so that judgment starts to decline along with our decision-making skills as this illness increases. We can also see withdrawal from social and work activities and just a lack of interest, as well as changes in mood and personality. Kind of comparing with changing an environment up on someone with this illness. If you take them to a hotel or you change the environment completely for them, we can see that those changes in their mood and personality start to maybe become a little bit more aggressive, a little bit more severe. It can be really hard for them to understand, especially for a lot of individuals who suffer from this disease. They are aware of their decline. They are aware of their illness. My grandmother is aware that she is not always there all the time, and she gets really frustrated by that, and it really makes her sad. And so we can start to see this lack of interest in things as this illness increases. So causes and risks. There's not a specific cause for Alzheimer's. However, there's a lot of different components that can increase the risk for Alzheimer's. Age is one. It's not a direct cause, but we typically see those with dementia and Alzheimer's in older adults. Typically around the 60s, early 70s, we can start to see those signs and symptoms. Family history is a big one. Our risk increases when one or more family members have had or has currently the illness. And then there's genetics. There are 2 different types of genes that play a role in this. There's risk and deterministic genes. And less than 1% of Alzheimer's are caused by deterministic genes. Risk genes typically causes more of an increased risk for getting this illness and disease. So what do you do? What is the treatment or prevention? Unfortunately, there hasn't been a cure yet, but the Alzheimer's Association has really been working hard and accepting donations and raising awareness and trying to hopefully find a cure one day. But there are some changes and treatments and prevention matters that you can do. So one of the things we talked about, behavior. Behavior is a huge thing that changes for older adults when they get Alzheimer's or experiencing dementia. Some important things that can be done: monitoring their personal comfort and avoiding being confrontational. One of the biggest and hardest things my mom had to understand when my grandmother moved in with us is that she wasn't going to get better. Unfortunately, she was just slowly going to get worse and worse over the years, which has happened. But my mother was trying to always say, why don't you remember this? Or we've already told you this. And for my grandmother, she just couldn't understand. Like, she couldn't understand that she had said the same question 5 times in a row, and it was causing my mom to be frustrated. So avoiding being confrontational and avoiding lashing out when they've repeated themselves multiple times is really important, because then they don't understand how many times they've said it. And comforting. Like I mentioned, my grandmother is aware of her illness and her disease, and it can be really sad and frustrating for her. So being someone who can comfort them in a time where they truly have no control. Another great prevention and treatment for their behavior is redirecting their attention. An individual with dementia and Alzheimer's can really get hung up on one subject or one thing. And sometimes it can be a good thing, and sometimes it can be a bad thing. So it's important to constantly be redirecting their attention to something that will not cause them frustration and annoyance, but give them comfort and peace. Along with that, creating a calm environment. As I mentioned earlier, changing their environment a lot can cause a lot of stress and worry and heighten that confusion. Creating a calm environment for them will help keep those signs and symptoms a little bit more at bay. And then you can also have medication prescribed for their behavior, like an antidepressant or something like that, that can help change their behavior a little bit more. You can also look at their sleep changes. Sleep changes is a huge one that happens with dementia and Alzheimer's. With a lack of interest in things comes with being lazy and tends to sleep in the day. So individuals who have dementia or Alzheimer's, their body clock, their circadian rhythm, their whole routine is thrown off. And so we oftentimes see them sleeping during the day and they're up at night. So with sleep changes, we want to create a routine reschedule. We want to make sure that they're up at a certain time. We want to make sure that they're not taking 4-hour afternoon naps or laying on the couch all day, making sure that they are up and about and doing things and awake and actively participating in something, whether it's puzzles or regular exercise, and then making sure that they are going to bed at an appropriate time for them. And for a lot of them, having a security blanket of a sort, whether that is a blanket or a pillow or a nightlight. For my grandmother, she wanted a nightlight. She always wants a nightlight in her room. That provides her a sense of security and peace for her at night. As I mentioned, the Alzheimer's Association really is growing and doing everything that they can to getting their program growing to find a cure for this illness. And 88 cents of every donation goes to their programs and services, and 100% of every donation is specifically designated for research that goes to finding an effective treatment and cure. So please, if you feel led to donate, please donate. Other than that, that is all I have for us today for our wellness discussion. I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks so much for tuning in. I'm Nora with Aegis Energy. Have a great one.